All right. Sweet. All right. Hey guys. Thanks to everybody that did show up here, and then I will send out an email at the end of this with the entire recording. So if you do have to hop out, or if people hop in late, they can catch up on kind of what they missed. But for those who don't know, I'm Ryan, the Junior Players Tour, and then I'm gonna throw it basically right over to the one outed guys, Ryan and Kim, and they're gonna take over for pretty much the rest of it. And then if you have any questions, kind of use the chat function, but I'll let them take over. Go for it, boys.
Excellent. Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, we'll jump right in. So welcome everybody. We're talking about off-season training today. So how you can turn your off-season into your biggest advantage. And hopefully we're going to teach you some of the secrets here that champion golfers actually use to dominate. And they take advantage of this off-season. So a few things here that we'll be talking about. We're going to be going through this thing called the 5 R's of the off-season. So we call these rest, recover, review, refocus, retool. We're going to dig into these into some detail. But the idea here is like you played a ton of events this summer. You're at the tail end of the year now, and you're just about ready to enter this off season. It's really time to start planning that off season and take advantage of these 5 R's and learn what some of the pros are doing and what some of the champions out there are doing. And with that in mind, I'm going to have Ryan just maybe share a little bit here that you can see on the right-hand side with you.
Of course. Yeah, I think something that many of us kind of are aware of is kind of each year Justin Thomas posts, generally at the end of the year, he'll post a kind of screenshot of a note. Sometimes he does it at the beginning of the year too, with the goals that he's set for the year. And then kind of at the end of the year, he'll kind of go through and say, hey, here's the goals that how successful I've been. Right. And kind of, you can kind of see in the caption there, he's kind of going through, obviously 2024 for Justin Thomas was a challenging year. Hence, a lot of the goals were unsuccessful. But he kind of talked about in that caption that his off season is, I had these goals set out, I put a plan in place, I wasn't successful, but now it's time you know, to kind of take some time off to review the goals that I've set for myself and then retool for the year coming up. And that's a process that all of the best players in the world use, including Justin Thomas here. And we're going to walk you through today step by step and what that looks like.
Yeah. So before we do that, we just want to ask a quick question of everyone here. So you can just answer in the chat and just really, it's very basic. How many of you will actually focus on your off season? And that includes something like reviewing the year, setting some new goals for the coming season, or making a plan for your off season training. So just hop in that chat and just say yes, no. You can even put, yeah, I do this if you want to give us a little bit of detail. We'll give everybody about a minute to just go in there.
Yeah, and some examples of that too could just be, maybe you actually have goals that you write out. Maybe it's capturing event results and like a tournament resume. It could be kind of a sit down with your coach if you do that, or parents. Lots of different ways that this could look like. Um, yeah, I see Kay does that. Fantastic.
I'm not looking at the comments there, Ryan. Do we have anything that's kind of basically have some yeses and some nos, or mostly
Yeah,
yeses?
KK's added a yes, and Kitty's added a not really. But yeah, no details on what that looks like, but I'm sure it's some of those
Yeah.
things mentioned.
Yeah, and this is usually something we see a mix of. Some athletes are really into this, they got a plan, others haven't really thought that much about it. Tonight, we're going to talk about like why we think you should be paying a lot more attention to this in particular. So with that in mind, why is this off season so important? And if we think about it, there's a few reasons here, but really when you look during season in Canada, especially here, this season is short. You might have 3 to 4 months to play some really serious competitive golf, and then also tends to be really too busy for you to make what we would call really major or big improvements in your game. And if you break that down, you start playing right around the time where school is starting to finish. So May, June, school's finishing, you're busy with school, you're starting to really gear up with golf, tournaments are starting, you're engaged in regular training. Some of you might have a summer job, or maybe you're even doing summer school. And obviously, a lot of you are going to have family events that are taking place in the summer. And the summer is kind of just, it's on high speed. You're going, going, going. There's not a lot of time to really step back, look at things, make some adjustments as need be. The off season is the best time for that to take place. This is your opportunity to make some really serious, lasting gains in your game for two reasons. One, you can get some proper rest and recover from injuries. And the second thing is like you can really put a plan in place and focus on some things that allow you to really grow your game. And so you see this formula here over on the right, that's stress plus rest equals growth. This idea of stress. So that's the training, the work, the playing, the events. And rest is actually taking that break, recuperating from injuries, giving your body and your brain time to take in all those lessons and grow from them. Those two things have to be together in order for you to grow. When we think about in season, you're mostly experiencing the stress side of the equation. There's not a lot of rest for a lot of athletes during the summer and in the middle of that season. So off season, take advantage of it. Lots of opportunity here. What do we typically see with an off season? And this is based on our experience working with juniors and college players over the years. And there's a few patterns, but typically it's this. A lot of athletes, there's not really a review of the previous season. They're not really taking a look at what went well, what didn't go well, or their strengths and weaknesses. And why that's a problem, there's really no clear idea of what needs work moving forward. The second thing that we see that's really typical in an off season is you're training without a targeted plan. So related to the point above, but what that means is you don't really have clear goals. You're not really sure what you're working on. And on top of that, if you're not sure what you're working on, how do you know if you're making improvements? How do you go about targeting those improvements? Third thing we see here is limited or no focus on healing, and this can be both physical and mental. And so if you don't focus on the healing side, you get the opportunity for further fatigue or increased injury. Maybe you have a nagging little injury that you haven't dealt with. It just doesn't go away. That's one of the things. And then secondly here is maybe there's some mental stuff. Maybe you got some hiccups from the year that you didn't get over that are really causing you some problems. This is one thing that you want to take care of. The other thing that we see typically in off season here is there's just a lack of rest. Some people go right from the last tournament to now they're full-time training immediately. And the big risk here and what we see is an opportunity for burnout. And this is really, really critical. Like the difference I see between junior players and even college players that don't take a break in between the main season and the off season is they do head for burnout eventually in their golf career as either a junior or a college player. So with that, a couple of the off-season keys, we introduced these 5 ideas already. These are the things that champions do, just really high level, and then we'll go into them in detail. So rest is taking a break, probably pretty obvious. Recover, it's doing whatever work you need to do on the mental side and the physical side to get back to 100%. The review, this is taking a look at your actual year, how it went at a lot of different levels, and we'll dig into those. Refocus just basically means here you're going to set some goals and make a plan, and then retool is where you're actually building new skills. It's doing the work.
And fantastic. With that in mind, one of the things that we want to make sure that you take away from this session, obviously, it's understanding the concept of the 5 hours, but most importantly, it's actually understanding how you can put those into practice for yourself. So at the end of this, we're hoping that you're going to have walked through these 5 hours kind of in this example. And we're going to use Ben here as an example of an athlete that's had a long season. He's played 12 events kind of from May through to September here, including the JPT, Golf Ontario, AJGA, and Golf Canada events. He's worked with his coach twice a week. He's working with the trainer once a week. And then on his own, he's doing training every day, whether that's at the gym, driving range, playing 18 holes of golf on the course or 9 holes. So it's been a very busy season for Ben. So we're going to go through each of those 5 hours, a little bit of the theory, but also what that looks like in practice for our athlete Ben here. And the goal is that you'll be able to connect with some of the things that Ben's going to be working on and then be able to apply those to your specific seasons and walk away with the plan yourself.
Yeah, just maybe a couple other details to add about Ben as well. Like Ben really, really wants to play Div 1 in the NCAA, and he's been in communication already with some schools. So this is a little bit of his profile as well.
Perfect.
All right. So here's our first category, our first factor. It's called rest. And rest really is about taking a short break because it leads to long-term benefits. And so I mentioned this already, like players who never put their clubs away versus those who do tend to go towards burnout. And that can carry into their next season. They get a little tired of playing golf and it starts to wear on them as the season goes on the following year, and it really starts to cause problems in terms of the level that they can perform at. So rest is really critical. Our goals here with rest, First of those, long-term motivation. It's really better to put the clubs away for 2 to 3 weeks and increase that motivation so you can't wait to grab them again and get out and play versus not putting them away. It also gives you a time to reflect on how things have gone over this past year and gain a little bit of perspective about what went well, what didn't go well. And sometimes in the heat of the moment, kind of at the tail end of the season, it's hard to see that stuff. A little bit of a break allows you to see things a little more clearly. And last for a lot of you too, it's just this opportunity to get caught up with things that you've missed over the summer months while you're busy playing golf. So maybe a little bit of chance to get back into school, a little bit of a chance to hang out with some friends or catch up on some things that are important to you outside of golf.
Perfect. And with that in mind, what's Ben going to do? So obviously he's had a busy summer season. So he's going to plan to take 2 full weeks off. He's not going to work with his coach. He's not going to play any rounds of golf. No kind of physical training. Not even going to engage with the sport of golf. Not going to watch golf. Um, the idea here is that we want to completely isolate Ben. That Ben wants to be completely isolated from the sport of golf and really to kind of drive that long-term motivation. I think oftentimes you kind of get into the season, you just get into, okay, every day I'm waking up, I'm going to golf. You kind of lose that like love of like, oh my goodness, I can't wait to go play golf again. And the idea of taking that rest is to get that love of it back again. So we're going to take 2 full weeks off. It's storing the clubs in the garage and it's taking time to catch up with friends after the season, right? Maybe seeing people that you weren't able to connect with. Obviously, now we're all back into school. And so it's an opportunity to connect back with those friends from school that maybe you weren't able to spend as much time with in the summer, or that you're even just getting to see again now that you're back in a new environment.
Yeah. And just before we move on to this next factor here, the other thing here that's really important with rest, sometimes parents, sometimes our coaches have really good intentions of us getting right into things again immediately as soon as the season finishes. It's actually really good for you to take a break and even for your coaches and parents to have a little break at the same time as well. All right. So our second factor here is called recover. And this really is about getting healthy, both mentally and physically. We need a little time to heal here, as you can see our little bandage, and that's about your body and your brain and your emotions. So it's important really for you to close off the previous season. For a lot of players, they're carrying like little nagging little injuries. Maybe you've got like a callus somewhere that causes you a little bit of pain, or maybe a little irritation in your wrist, or maybe you have something that's a little more serious that actually needs further treatment. It's really, really important you get that stuff taken care of so you can be back to 100% before the next season starts. This also happens on the mental and emotional side. So for most of you, you're going to have some great experiences from this past season, and you might have a few of those moments that you didn't love that caused you a little bit of pain. And so it's really important for you to close those off as well so they don't cause you fear or doubt when you're moving forward. And this is pretty normal. Everybody's going to have some negative experiences out on the golf course, especially in competitive golf. You have to be able to process them so you can keep moving forward. So it's just like having a physical injury. If you get a cut on your hand and you don't take care of it properly, it's just going to keep opening up and opening up and opening up. So you have one of those kind of mental boo-boos. It's really important that you process it so you can move on.
Absolutely. And when we look into Ben's specific case here, he's kind of had a bit of this nagging thing in his shoulder kind of thing. Sometimes, I've something that I've gotten myself, truthfully. And so he's going to plan on working with physio kind of once a week over the next 8 weeks to try to just get that under control when the golf quantity is lower kind of in this early part of the off season. And then mentally, you want to address some of those negative experiences, as Kim just mentioned. We're going to journal about some of the disappointment at the Canadian Juniors. When Ben was at the Canadian Juniors this past August, he'd had a really, really great first round, and he was kind of in the top 15 and really hoping to contend for the tournament, but then kind of fell off in the second and third rounds and wasn't actually able to compete and was just kind of struggling to play his best golf in the later rounds of the tournament. And really wants to journal about, what went wrong, right? What was going on in his head? Why did that actually happen? And so taking some time to do that is sometimes difficult during the season. Ideally, we'd like to make space for it, but in the off season, we have that extra time. We really want to prioritize it.
Great. So we talked rest, we've talked recover. Now we move into this next one. This is review. And review is really about taking a look at what happened over the past season here, capturing what went well, figuring out what needs some more work and focus. And so we're going to do that from a couple of different perspectives. The first of these is what we call the real and feel. And both of these aspects are really, really important. So the real is the data. This is your stats tracking. It's the numbers. It's the stuff that we can quantify. The other thing that we need to look at is the feel. How do you actually feel about the way you played, how you performed over the course of the season? What were your experiences that you had? And both of these need to work together. The other thing that we're going to look at is what were your strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities as it relates to something that we talked about in one of our earlier presentations called the 4 components of performance. So if we look at things from a physical perspective, your fitness, your nutrition, hydration, recovery, we look at technical, your skills, your technique, the equipment that you're using, tactically, strategy, your course awareness, situational awareness, and on the mental side of the game here, your mindset, how you're managing emotions, those mental skills that help you perform at a high level, and social skills, your ability to interact and deal with other people. We're going to look across those four, and you're going to look at what you did well, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, areas of opportunities, so that you can have some idea of what you want to focus on moving forward. And again, as we talked about here, review, one of these big components here is the real and the feel. And as I said, both of these types of feedback are really important to consider. The data and the numbers, I think everyone's got a really firm sense of that. Hopefully, all of you have been collecting data over the course of the summer, either using the 1IOTA app or something similar to it that helps give you a breakdown of what's working and what's not within your game. And then there's the emotions and feelings. These are kind of the gut feelings or impressions about your play. And here's at SFU, one of the things that we had was a shirt that said numbers don't lie. That's true. Numbers don't lie, but they don't tell the whole story. It's really important that you also take a look at your emotions and feelings. And here's an example. Your stats might say your putting is fantastic, and your emotions and the way you feel about it, you might feel like you're the worst putter out there in the junior ranks, and you're worried about your putting. Your numbers might not back that up. And we sometimes see the opposite of that. You feel like you're great at a certain skill, and the numbers actually say, this probably needs a little bit of work. So it's really important that we address both sides of that equation to get a full picture. When we talk about this, what kinds of things are we talking about? Well, when we look at the real side, we look at the data and the numbers. Here's some suggestions for things that you should be paying attention to. So strokes gained data is really ideal in each of these categories. If we look at driving, you're looking at tee shots in play, fairways hit. If we look at approach shots, it's greens hit, your overall proximity. Short game, you can see here, what's your save percentage, what's your average proximity. And in putting, we're looking at feet of putts per round and things like how many 3 putts per round are you having. Real numbers, hard concrete data that you can pay attention to. On the feel side, you're going to reflect on that experience from the past year. Like, what are your gut feelings or impressions? What are the highlights? What are some moments that really stand out to you? And they might actually have nothing to do with your performance. It might be more about the quality of the experience. Maybe you went to a cool course that you've always wanted to go to, or you got to go travel with some friends, and that was really important to you. What are the lowlights? Could be the same kind of thing. Maybe you performed really well at an event, but the experience itself wasn't a real fun one. And then we're looking at things like strengths and weaknesses of your game. So those is kind of the comparison of the real versus feel, and we need both. Both are really important for you to get the full picture.
Apologies. When we look at right now for Ben specifically and looking at his review, we're going to kind of look at the real portion on the stat side. And so this is what we're going to start off here with the stats. And so some of the screenshots you see there, some of Ben's stats from this past year, those are screenshots from the 1IOTA app, which Ben was using for this past year to track his stats, which makes capturing a lot of those real stats super simple. If you're using a comparable tool, then it'll also be relatively simple for you. What we can see here is that Ben was hitting 12.4 tee shots in play per round, which is great. 11.4 greens, which, for the level of Ben's at is reasonable. It'd like to be something that you could see is going to be improved. He's getting up and down about 54% of the time, and then three putting just less than once per round. So generally in the kind of elite junior ranks, those are going to be generally good stats. But when we look at the event results specifically, you can see he has 2 top 10 finishes, but also 3 missed cuts, right? So you kind of see there's a big variance in the scores that he has. So even though those stats maybe are showing some, consistency in the result, the outcome doesn't necessarily align. And this is kind of where the feel part also comes really into play. Sometimes the stats can hide what actually happens. And so when we look at Ben's season on the kind of the feelings and emotion side, Ben kind of felt like this year was a bit of a failure, right? We mentioned earlier, Ben was kind of aspiring to get to D1 golf and was talking to some of the coaches. So we knew that they were watching some of the important events of the year and was worried about kind of what they were going to think about some of his results. That's something that me personally, as Ryan Stoley, is something that I've experienced as I was going through junior golf. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are similar as well. Kind of back to Ben here. We look at his drivers. His driver was a problem all year, right? We saw in those stats that he had this is what he feels, right? You saw that he had 12 and a half tee shots in play, right? Which means one and a half are out of play per round. Generally, could be positive, could be negative. It depends on kind of the level of golf you want to play. But for Ben, that was really a big issue for him. He lost two leads, can't handle the pressure, right? You saw that he had two top 10 finishes earlier. Apparently, he was in the lead, as we're seeing here, and that's obviously not going to be something that he's going to see as a negative rather than a positive. And the Ontario Juniors was a big event. He was playing with some friends from the city, and it was something that was a highlight for him, kind of outside the result. And these are kind of examples of feelings and emotions that Ben experienced over the year that we want to highlight and bring forward when we're kind of going through both sides of this review in the year.
Yeah, just to add to that really quickly, Ryan, you can see here too, like Ben actually kind of went back and forth between really enjoying and really worrying about his game.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up for sure. And so when we kind of get into more detail, we want to talk about specifically, what went well and then what needs work with Ben's review. And we can kind of eat or lean into the real components of the stats. And what I mean by that is like the actual hard data, right? The stats we are collecting throughout the years and what that tells us, as well as kind of the feeling, right? What did it feel like as we were going through? And so I'll kind of highlight a couple of these items here, but we've broken this down. We strongly recommend that you do this as well in your own reviews into each of the four components of performance. So on the physical side, we can see that Ben was doing a great job getting sleep. He had averaging about 8 hours a week, but his neck and shoulder pain that we mentioned earlier was an issue that was kind of stopping him from feeling like he was physically ready all the time. On his technical side, our putting stats supported, right? He had less than 1 3 putt per round. His putting was awesome. On the tactical side, he was reading greens pretty well. He's reading greens really well, I should say. Those things obviously are connected to each other. Oftentimes, strong green reading will support a limited number of 3 putts. But then we look at the mental side. He struggled when college coaches were watching or paying attention to his results, right? So those are things that we want to make sure that we're paying attention to and are not going to be identified as easily through the hard stats, but it's something that's really going to come through loud and clear when we're looking at the feelings and emotions throughout the year.
Okay, so that takes us to our next factor here, which is this idea of refocusing. So he's done the rest, he's done the recover, he's done the review, and now we're looking at what are the core areas or where are these places where I actually want to focus my time, energy in the off season, and that'll help me achieve my goals. So you got to get really clear on this. And we're talking about making a plan essentially. And when we look at this, we're looking at three big things. We're looking at what are your opportunities to make improvements? And that's across the four components. We're also looking at how many resources do you have available to you? Do you live in a community where it's really tough to get anything other than just your swing coach? Or do you have access to a swing coach, a physical trainer, a mental skills specialist, and a bunch of other stuff? And then the last kind of factor there that you should be considering is how much time per week are you actually able to invest in working on your game? And this is going to vary depending on the level you're playing at, where you're at, what other kind of core responsibilities you have here during the off season.
Absolutely. Thanks. So when we look at Ben in specific in this situation, he looks at kind of some opportunities. So having gone through the review phase, we kind of saw, some areas where he was, happy with his performance and areas where he wasn't necessarily as happy. And so some of those opportunities, areas that he wasn't necessarily as happy, are things we want to focus on during this off season to really make sure that we're hitting into next season with the best that we can be. So one of the things he noticed was that he wasn't hitting it quite as far, right? Ben's kind of moving in to the older age groups in competitions. And he noticed that, when he was at Canadian juniors, he just wasn't able to keep up with the best players and how far they're hitting it. Those players that are going on to college next year. And it's not something he really wants to focus on, right? Getting stronger, increasing swing speed. He also wants to make sure he has clear goals for the season. Kind of bringing us back to the beginning of the presentation when we talked about Justin Thomas. Justin Thomas is really, really clear on his goals for the season. He has both outcome-based goals and statistic-based goals, and they're not even shared, but I'd even suspect that Justin Thomas also has goals kind of outside of just those kind of concrete statistical categories and in kind of more of the feel state as well. And we want to make sure that we're very clear on those goals. That's one of the things Ben's identified as an opportunity here. And then that third piece is how to play for the lead. That's come up a couple times now. He was nervous with college coaches watching. He has a couple of top 10 finishes where he was previously leading, and he wants to make sure that he learns how to do that. So those are kind of the three big opportunities. When he looks at the resources he has available, he's been working with the coach throughout the year, and he's going to have that continuing through the winter, which is awesome. Sometimes coaches go away for the winter, but in Ben's case, he's going to have that access, which is perfect. He's going to be working with a mental skills coach, which is really going to help kind of with that opportunity around how to play for the lead and setting clear goals. And then he also has access to an indoor driving range or dome where he's going to be able to actually see ball flights. Obviously, if you're out in the west coast of Canada, you can't actually be outdoors all year round. But in most other places in Canada, an indoor driving range is going to be the most likely resource that you should be able to get access to. And then Ben, kind of looking at his school access and just actually travel to the golf facilities, he's hoping to get about 6 to 8 hours a week. I think one of the things that's key when Ben was reviewing this is not only kind of what's ideal, right? You want to make sure you identify what your time is and what you're able to commit to it, as opposed to these are all the things that I need to get done, and I need to spend 50 hours a week on golf in order to, be on the PGA Tour next year. Well, sometimes that's not necessarily going to be realistic, right? What is actually real and available to you, right? Just like the resources you have available to you, realistically, what is the time you have available to you in order to get to those practice facilities and actually do the work that you need to get better? So converting that kind of general opportunities as well as the resources that are available and the time into an actual concrete plan. And so Ben's broken this down again into the four components of performance. We want to make sure that we're focusing in each of these areas throughout the year whenever we have the opportunity to. On the physical side, Ben identified hitting the ball farther with drivers. So he wants to build strength and speed, and he's going to increase his workouts with the trainer from once a week to twice a week. On the technical side, he's going to continue working on driver on the driving range, right? So driver is really a big focus for him, right? He's losing 1.5 golf balls around on average, which is not something that he's happy with. And so he wants to make sure he's spending lots of time on the technical aspects of his driver throughout the off season. The tactical component here is something that's I would we identify is more difficult to work on throughout the year. Tactics tend to be something that you need to be on course to do. There is some things you can do in the off season and related to learning. Kind of a shout out here to a competitor of One Iota's, but Decade Golf has phenomenal resources around the course strategy aspects of approach play, tee shot grids, and kind of what is the best way that you can actually make decisions on the golf course. And so that's one of the things that Ben's identified he's going to do is kind of work through some approach tactics on the course throughout the off season. And then the fourth category on the mental side, Ben's going to work with the mental skill coach once a week. He's going to define what success looks like for him and then build confidence and belief in himself in order to be able to play with the lead. And then he's also going to work on different scenarios. One of the things that was identified in a previous presentation of ours was the scenario card, which we'll actually bring up again later. A scenario card about identifying what's a specific situation that's going to happen, and then what are you as the athlete going to do in order to manage that situation. Those are things that you can continue building on throughout the year, off season, in season, even during tournaments as they come up. And that's something that Ben's going to identify as a priority here during the off season on the mental side.
Perfect. All right, so we've gone through four factors already. We've gone through rest, recover, review, refocus, and now we get into this idea of retool. And retool is really, it's just pretty simple. It's put that plan into action. You can have the best plan on the world. If you don't do the work, it's not going to matter. And so this is what we're talking about, putting the plan that you created on the focus side into action and tracking your progress as you're doing so.
Absolutely. And so that's exactly what we see here. And we saw that plan on the last slide. Ben was going to do 2 workouts a week for the trainer and once a week with the mental skill coach. We can see here him on the right side meditating as part of his practice with his mental skill coach. And these are just both examples of Ben putting the plan to action. This is actually the work. This is the rise and grind component of the off season that you want to get to. But we want to make sure we get through all of the components of rest and recover and actually doing a review before we just start working really hard at something that's not necessarily the most important thing for us to do.
Yeah. So with this in mind, we're challenging each of you here tonight to actually take a look at a resource that we put together. You can see up here, there's a QR code, so you could download this yourself. But we've got a tool here, a template that will help you do the yearly review and your off-season planning. And so there's a few things here that are identified. We haven't shown the whole form up here. Actually, I think we have.
No, it's part of it.
That's right. Yeah, we're missing the one sheet there. But basically, kind of some of the things that you're looking at in the review, enter your event results from the season, kind of round by round, what your score was, what your placing was. You can take a look at adding in here your season scoring average and comparing it to last year. A couple other things here, like where do you think there are the biggest opportunities for you to make an improvement? And we talked about these across the four components. And then we've tried to create something here that's a really simple kind of checklist template for you on the resources side, so you don't have to think too hard on this one. Like physically, do you have access to a trainer in a gym? Technically, do you have access to a swing coach, a driving range, a short game area, a putting area? Tactically, do you have training videos or courses, or maybe an app that you can tap into? And on the mental side, can you access a mental skills coach or maybe books and courses? And maybe there's some other things that you want to consider, but it's basically a yes, no, and then what details you would have related to that. Really powerful, useful, simple tool to make this a pretty simple, slick process for you to do the review. Ryan, anything you want to add on the template here before I?
No, yeah, it's exactly right. It's available. It's just kind of on the free resources. We'll make sure that it's also available on the JPT website as well for you guys to access. And then potentially connect with Ryan there to link it actually in the email that will be sent out afterwards with the recording. So anyone that's also not here, we'll make sure that they have the ability to get to it. So it's a framework for doing exactly what we've been talking with today.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Now, one of the things that we've talked about is you're looking at the four components, and obviously we have a little bit of a bias here towards the mental side in terms of what we're presenting in terms of material. One thing for all of you that would be really powerful and useful is take a look at your past season, figure out what scenarios, situations caused you some challenges, whether you had difficulty recovering from them or they prevented you from performing at the highest level before they even happened. And we strongly recommend you spend a little time and map out those scenarios and create some scenario cards and work on them in your off season. And if everyone can remember here, with the scenario card, pretty simple. It's like, what's the situation that you want to be ready to handle? So you would detail that, and then you would identify how you're going to handle it, your response. What am I going to do when that happens again? So in our example with Ben, we'd be looking at probably how he handles a lead in an event or playing close to the lead. And he'd work through a number of different strategies or responses that he wants to try and utilize in this coming season. So he'd be doing some mental skills, visualization work probably around this area. All right. And then, of
And then one of
course, yeah, sorry, go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, sorry. And so one of the other things that we kind of mentioned as well through the presentation was obviously on the kind of the real and the feel side of the stats on the review. The one iota app is something that Ben was using in our fictitious example here to track his stats throughout the year. And we want to encourage you to take advantage of that same resource through the JPT. You guys have access to discounted access, and you always get a 30-day free trial to try it out. So you can go right in here and define, track your stats to actually understand what those real components were for your review, as well as actually get some hints along the way of some recommendations about how you can actually improve and get better along the way. And this is the same thing, just identifying some of the kind of recommendations that are available for you to make your off-season planning easy.
Yeah. All right. From there, that's essentially what we want to talk about. So we can open that up to any questions if people have any questions related to those 5 R's and the things that we're recommending you do in your off season.
I think I also want to encourage you guys as well as you've been kind of listening through. Like, if there are specific things that happened in your season that you're curious about how to deal with. Obviously, got a smaller group here, so we're able to kind of open up a bit more. If you are curious about maybe how to deal with specific resource or time limitations that you have, we're love to hear some of those examples.
I've got one. So it happens often enough that where something happens where a player gets disqualified for something that's not necessarily like like something they're like intent, like it's for signing for a wrong score, for
Mm.
some sort of technical error. And obviously that sucks. Not fun to get disqualified for any reason. But like when I'm the one who does it, so I'm usually the one disqualifying the kid. And most of them are always concerned about like, oh, how is this going to look on my record,
Yeah.
schools,
Mm.
kind of stuff. Or like, let's say you get disqualified last tournament of the year. Like, how do you deal with getting disqualified and kind of the impacts of that?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I'm going to talk about this, from a coach perspective and a mental skills specialist perspective. And we talked about it earlier in the presentation. It's that rest recover. You need to do the recover portion. You actually have to process that event. Otherwise, it's going to create a little bit of a scar that carries with you moving forward. It's like It's not as extreme, but obviously, even if you get a slow play warning, sometimes people get really freaked out about that and they start focusing on that. What you don't want is now when you play to be focused on, I'm worried what this looks like for me. I'm worried that I'm going to have a black mark on my name from other coaches because I made this mistake. It's best to kind of process it. That means a couple of things. One, if you have a coach that you're working with right now, whether it's your swing coach or a mental skills coach, talk to them about it. Number one. Number two, it does happen. We're human. We make some mistakes. It's going to happen. So you have to kind of accept that. Number three, some stuff that you can do on your own, journal about it. One of the best things you could do is kind of journal, get those thoughts and emotions out on paper so you can park them a little bit. I would say the other thing is like when you start pursuing a college program, you want to be able to explain this. So this would be one thing where you can talk about it and highlight it and reframe it as a learning opportunity. I had this really negative experience. Here's what I learned from that. I'm better prepared to handle things moving into the future. So those would be a few of the things that you can kind of look at doing. But I'd say the most important thing is you want to process it versus spiral on it. So talk with someone, figure out what went wrong, how it led to that, how you're going to make sure it doesn't happen again. And then you have an explanation for it that you could provide to college coaches if that became something that you needed to do. Ryan, anything you want to add to that from your perspective as a player?
Yeah, for sure. I would say that, like, as somebody actually who has signed a wrong scorecard, fortunately in the direction where I didn't get disqualified, um, the situation is like generally kind of looking back and reflecting on it is like I was just exhausted, right? It was the last event of the season. I'd played however many events, 12 or 15 events throughout the year, and I was tired, right? And it was a reflection to say like I played too many events and I was too tired to actually be able to continue on with the to play at my best, right? And that's when you make mistakes like that, right? Is when you kind of get to the situations where you're not thinking as clearly as you normally are, and all the things that Kim had highlighted there already. But I've done it, right? And I like to think that I should never have done it, but it happens.
Yeah, it's more common than people think. You'll get over it, but you got to spend some time processing it. So you have to forgive yourself. You got to figure out how you're going to make sure it doesn't happen again. Do that. You gotta heal that wound.
For sure.
Anybody else got any questions? You guys can either fire them in the chat or just unmute yourselves.
Fantastic. And if you guys think of something later on, obviously you guys are gonna have access to the off-season planning form as you guys are going through it and have questions about it. Feel free to reach out to us and ask us questions about kind of how it's working. There's a contact form on our website, or if you're kind of already a part of the app, then you will have access to the help form there as well. And feel free to reach out. And we'd love to kind of hear your experience and hear your questions.
Yeah, and I'll include all the contact info in that email I send out tomorrow with the link to the recording
Right.
and like all the different documents. And they'll be
Love
on
it.
our like our JPT website as well. And then we'll have them on in that everything will be in that one folder. So when I send everybody the link, it'll be every single one of the webinars from this year. So
Love it.
you guys will have it all there. Um, cool. Anything else you guys want to add, or you guys all good?
I think just like take advantage of the off season. It's really easy to just kind of drift into it and you end up just doing what you typically do. Maybe you spend a lot of time at the range, but it's not very focused. You can make massive improvements and significant changes in your game with just a little bit of dedicated review of the past season and a little bit of a targeted focus for this coming season. So it doesn't like it might look pretty daunting. It's not going to take that much time and effort, and it'll pay off in the end if you spend a couple hours up front to map out a bit of a plan for what you actually want to do and accomplish in the off season.
Yeah, I will echo that. As a junior golfer, did extremely extensive kind of off-season reviews and plans, kind of even before kind of these five. I was introduced to these 5 hours, and I found it incredibly useful. And know that having a framework of 5 hours would have made it even easier for me to go through that.
Yeah, and I did none of it and sucked as a junior golfer. So cool. Thanks everybody.
Fantastic. All right.
I will send off that link here. So thank you everybody for coming out. And if you have any questions, just shoot me an email and I'll put you in touch with the guys here.
Love it.
That'd be
Thank
great.
you. This was really informative on how to deal with my off season.
Glad to hear it.